Norfolk. Delighted that you've joined me for the third episode of Baroness Barker's book club. And it's a really simple one this time. All of you MPs, particularly you new MPs, been flat out since July, not stopped for breath, I don't think. And we're coming up to Christmas. Is that a kind of fair state of affairs?
That's very accurate, and we are just coming up for air. It's taken an extraordinary amount of time to get an office in the constituency. My brilliant team are in place and making really good headway with the backlog of correspondence we've received since the snap election in July.
So, reading material that is not emails, that's our subject for today. Do you read to switch off anyway? Do you read?
So I tend to fall asleep in the same page in private eye every day of the week. And if I get to the end of the week and I'm still on that same page, then I treat myself and just cut straight to the cartoons at the back. But I did read for pleasure once upon a time, and
Okay.
I'm hoping to get the chance to this Christmas as well.
So that's it. So this Christmas, chance to read. What are you hoping that you might get given as a book?
Well, what I hope, in the same way as I got sent a lot of ties when I got told off for not wearing a tie in the chamber, I hope that I get sent some books that are about or from North Norfolk, the place where
Ah,
I'm from and where I'm absolutely delighted to represent. And it's really surprising. There's actually a lot of references to North Norfolk in literature that I hadn't completely appreciated. I'm a big fan of Kazuo Ishiguro, and there's references to Norfolk in there.
okay.
Black Beauty, of course. Anna Sewell's got connections to, well,
Mm.
just inside, and then actually her epitaph is just outside of the constituency. We think we're just talking about it this morning as a team. We think that Black Beauty was written, quite a lot of it, in North Norfolk. So anything from anyone, and this isn't an invitation to send me free books, but anyone who's a writer in North Norfolk now is what I'd hope to find under my tree.
Well, you have got one who's very successful. You've got Ellie Griffiths, haven't you?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And
Love Ellie
I don't
Griffiths.
know if I own any Ellie Griffiths books. Yeah,
For
no, that
those
that
for,
that, that
for
would be
those who
welcome.
Yeah, for those who are watching and don't know, Ellie Griffiths writes these cracking crime novels, that are all set on the Norfolk coast, really, and she manages to make vast swathes of flat land really, really interesting, doesn't she?
I mean, it's the bleaker the better for crime.
Yeah.
And actually, I read my first. I can remember the last book I read for pleasure. It was just before the election. Um, I'm not historically been a particularly keen crime reader, but I read a crime thriller and really enjoyed it. Actually, wasn't from a Norfolk writer, but that would be a great addition. I'm also conscious of how many fantastic nature writers we've got in our part of the world because there's so
Mm.
much brilliant nature there too. My wife is a keen nature reader and observer, and so actually quite a lot of the reading opportunities that I have come from books that she's just finished,
Right.
which includes several of the books that I ordered having become elected as an MP, which were things like Ian Dunt's book on how Westminster works and why it doesn't, Rory Stewart's book on pretty much the same thing, a load of stuff to, hopefully not regret this decision, a lot of which I can totally relate to. So actually what's happened is that Jill has read those books when they've arrived and has been telling me about them. And I'm completely convinced already because one of the first things that I felt coming here was how much of a shake-up things need. And that's not a party political comment. It's that the way that government and different departments work, they're so siloed, they haven't changed for decades, and the world has changed around us in that time. It desperately needs modernization and a really big change in the way things are structured and organized. So that shake up and in fact some of the things that Rory Stewart writes about I find really I can relate to and really motivating because that's exactly what I think needs to happen to make things work in this country again.
He's a very entertaining read, isn't he, Boris Stewart? Yeah, it's kind of like work, but it's not work because it's quite entertaining at the same time, I
Yeah,
think.
and I'm definitely the sort of person that goes on a busman's holiday. So, I watch the thick of it. When I used to work in a pub, I lived in the pub actually when I was general manager of the Bucks Arms in Blickling, and I used to watch Faulty Towers at the end of each day. So reading this sort of stuff at night doesn't make me feel like I'm just extending the working day. I don't read policy papers at night or Acts of Parliament, but I have read quite a few of those in the past few weeks.
No, it is weird, and it's one of the things that we are uncovering on the book club is the amount of us, so many of us, who do our job and throw ourselves into our job, work very long hours and very passionate, and then we sit down and read books about it. It's
Yeah,
just strange, isn't
it's
it?
it's it's pretty tragic, and I think your opening comments about just how busy things have been are absolutely right. So I did do a bit of a trawl around and try and find some books that I'd not read that I would want to receive for Christmas, Liz, and I came across Stooky Blues. Anyone
Oh,
who's tried to pronounce North Norfolk coastal towns and villages who isn't from North Norfolk will know the folly of trying to do this, because we have places like Haysborough, which, if you're going to read it phonetically, is written Happisburg.
yes.
It's a great place, fantastic pub. We've got Stooky, which is again Stiffkey if you're going to read it out as it's written. And there's a Norfolk-based author called DJ Taylor. I hadn't come across this author, but it's a collection of short stories, Stooky Blues, by DJ Taylor, about the lockdown, and it's set in Norfolk. It's got a Norfolk publisher. It reads from the reviews like a fantastic testimony to the landscape that's here. And I just love locally read books, or locally written books rather, that capture those kind of characters that, of course, I'm sure for legal reasons we can't recognize, but we recognize their types.
Mm.
And I think it's a really important part of how we capture and celebrate our local culture here in Norfolk, as well as being entertained and inspired and educated by reading.
When I went into the Lords, both PD James and uh, uh, um, oh, come on, her great colleague, who was the Labour peer, who was also the crime writer, wrote as Barbara Vine and other things, and they used to do a sort of double act. They used to go and people they raise money for charity by being interviewed. And one of the things that PD James said, and she was absolutely right, was if you read a crime novel, it's a great way to find out about how people live and
Yeah,
about particular places, and that's
yeah.
that's true. Even if you're not into sort of murder and all that kind of stuff, it is. So you're right. I think the location of a book is can be a real well, I mean, reading a book is a bit like going on a holiday in your head, isn't it? Really, you go somewhere.
Absolutely. And there was a book called, I can't remember what it's called, it's by Madeleine Albright, who wrote
Mm,
about Britain's coastal communities.
really?
And was it no, not Madeleine Albright? She was secretary to Secretary of State in the US. She
Yeah.
must have been a Madeline, another
Madeline
Madeline.
Bunt? Is it not
Madeline
Madeline
Bunting, that's right.
Bunting?
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It was fantastic, and
Oh,
she went round on a whole trip around the UK trying to find out what was happening to our coastal towns.
right.
And it was sort of tragic but charming description of life in these once destinations for holidays and tourism,
Mm,
many of which have really fallen into a very sorry state. Some of our poorest communities,
mm,
live in what were once Regency places of Regency
yeah.
grandeur. Um, but of course, in a country where half the population lives in a rural or coastal community, we have some exceptions to that rule. And so towns like Cromer, which are perched, on the very edge of the North Norfolk coast, which I remember in my childhood, that was where we went to the beach, to Overstrand,
Mm,
just to the east as well. But Cromer in the last 10 years has really found its sense of identity, and it's managed to maintain the balance between like active coastal industry, so fishing, crab potting, and tourism, of course, but without sort of losing it. It's the opposite of a ghost town at winter, for instance. And I think we're really lucky in North Norfolk to have coastal towns sharing as well, and villages all along the coast, which have sort of bucked the national trend really, and have kept it together. And Madeline's book really kind of reminded me that there's a lot of rural poverty in the UK, but there's also a lot of ways in which communities have been able to sort of rise up again from the loss of a lot of that domestic tourism. We actually need more of it. We need a lot of people to come to places like North Norfolk and witness the climate we're trying to protect, for a start, the sorts of birds and animals we're trying to preserve, and to enjoy, somewhere fantastic in our reach. Doesn't need you to get onto an aeroplane and isn't going to contribute to the very problem we're trying to tackle.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of, if there was an upside of lockdown, it was that people are now rediscovering parts of the United Kingdom that perhaps they might not have done before. So that's a really good shout out. One final thing, are you going to give anybody a book this year?
I've been allowed by my team one self-indulgent reference, and I genuinely am going to be giving this book to quite a few people, because traditionally I do this with every new Lib Dem county council candidate. I give them a copy of the book Fourth to First that my sister and I wrote when I first stood for and won my county seat in Melton Constable in 2017. And so this is an outrageous plug, but the second edition will be out soon, updated with some of the general election success, and I will be giving that to all of our fantastic new candidates standing for the Lib Dems.
Oh, brilliant. Can I have a signed copy then, since you've used my book club to plug it?
You absolutely can. You're also welcome to ask for an unsigned copy, which I'm sure is a rarer thing. But I'll certainly gladly get one of those to you, Liz. If you like campaign geekery, it's definitely one for you.
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, I tend to mix up my reading between fact and fiction and heavy stuff, and so when I've come off the sort of equivalent of a fictional War and Peace, I think, all right, I'll read something practical now. That may be it.
Well, this is why we wrote it, because a lot of the stories we encountered and the people we met in the course of the campaign, because campaigning in rural areas takes you down streets that even if you've lived there your whole life, you'd never gone down.
Yeah.
And so it was our sheer amusement and inspiration of the sort of variety of different people living lives in North Norfolk that caused us to want to write it. So it's not fiction at all, but some of it reads like fiction because of the stories. People get themselves into these most extraordinary situations. So yeah, it's not just about focus leaflets and canvassing analysis.
But what's not to like about focus leaflets and canvassing? Stefan, thank you so much.
Thanks
it's been really good fun. And I wish you and all of your team a very, very happy Christmas. Thank you.
And to you. Thanks for having me.